Have you ever had trouble getting hired at a trucking company? On this episode of Driven Too Far, we're taking a look at the hiring reports that may prevent you from getting that trucking job. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to Driven Too Far. On this episode, we're decoding your PSP report and your MVR report. I've got a guest with me today. We haven't had you in for a while, but this is Mandee. She's a professional recruiter, and I think you told me you'd been doing recruiting for 7+ years?
Yes, 7+ years.
Yeah, so she's one of the best in the business for sure. I've worked with Mandee for a long time. She spends her whole day talking to drivers on the phone. And even if it's drivers we don't hire, she does a great job of helping people, helping drivers get hired, even if it's in another place. So one of the things I wanted to talk to today is, the PSP report. First of all, what is that and why is that important to a driver?
So your PSP report contains all of your inspections out on the road.
Okay.
So that could be to crashes, speeding tickets, anything that you're getting pulled in for. So it will show bad tires, brakes out of line. They'll look at your paperwork, or they'll do a full equipment check on you too as well. So it will just depend on the different levels of inspections that they do on you.
So is that a requirement? When a driver applies to a new company, does that company, are they required to run that PSP report?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so it's one of the many forms you have to get. What does that tell you as a carrier, as a recruiter? What are you looking for on that report?
That tells me how well they're doing their pre-trip inspections before they hit the road, or what has happened when they got pulled in, to make sure that they are doing all the right things and making sure that they're safe out on the road as well.
So tell me, what does a good PSP report look like versus maybe what is a bad one?
Typically, a good PSP report it's roughly about 2 pages long, because the top half is putting all the driver's information in there. It's showing first name, last name, where their driver's license came from. And then it's the next portion down is do they have any accidents, any crashes? What's those crashes look like too as well? Was it a tow away? Was somebody hurt and had to go to the hospital? Things like that. It will break it down for you and show you where it came from.
Okay.
As well. And then it will move through what type of inspection that they had. So then at that time, if they got pulled in for a level 1 inspection, in there it's going to show his driver's license and all the same detail, but it will show he got pulled over in Iowa and they did a level 1 inspection on them, and what defects did they find at that time.
So is it safe to say, PSP stands for pre-employment screening? So if you're a new driver to the industry, you may not have anything show up on a PSP report.
Correct.
Yet,
you
right?
might have nothing.
And if you've been driving for years, if you've kept your nose clean, you may not have anything. But if you haven't, if you've had inspections, roadside inspections, you may have all kinds of data and history on there.
Oh, absolutely.
So what if I'm a veteran driver and a couple times a year I get pulled into the scales for inspections and I get clean inspections? Does it reflect that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so as a recruiter, you're considering bringing this person onto your company and stuff. That's really what you want to see. Is it's showing you the patterns or behaviors of that particular driver. Mm-hmm. Tell me about some of the worst ones you've seen.
Oh my gosh. I've had some that are 8 and 9 pages long, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know why they have a license still.
What's the record? 8 or 9 pages, holy cow.
I'm like, they have been hit with everything in the book, from not having ELD, proper documentation, clear down to bald tires and brakes out of alignment. And one point, the gentleman didn't even have his driver's license on him. And I'm like, what? How do you leave the house without your driver's
Right.
license? So there's lots of fun details that you do see typically in some of those that are 8 and 9 pages long.
So be honest, how far does that applicant get in your process? If you run a PSP report, and I assume you do it relatively soon
It's
or early in the process.
One of the very first reports that I pull.
What if you see 8 or 9 pages come across, do you already know what that's going to tell you?
Yes, it already tells me that they're not doing what they need to be doing
Out on the road.
to be
Right.
safe
So,
on the road.
as a professional driver, maybe there's some that don't understand or don't even know this process happens in the background. I'm going to guess, there's been guys out there that have applied for jobs and maybe even turned down for jobs, but nobody's taken the time to actually tell them why or help try to educate them on why that
Yeah.
is.
And that's half the battle is like, if I can't hire you, I want to be able to tell you why I can't. Or if you don't know what's on there, you're going to keep applying to other companies and they're going to be telling you the same thing. Sorry, can't, you're not going to move on and become a driver with us. So the idea is to educate them while you have them on the phone. Sometimes those conversations aren't the best because they're upset. Oh, that's not on there. That should be on the company. Why is it on me? And typically it's because you are the driver of the vehicle.
Right.
This is your machine. You should be doing the proper
They have the
inspections.
responsibility to do that.
Yes.
That's part of it, is being a professional driver. And I'm sure hopefully you get some that are receptive to it and understand that you're trying to actually help them so
Yes.
they can improve their chances down the road to get that dream job they want. But I'm sure there's some that get really defensive and probably have some choice words for you or maybe even just hang up on you.
It's all of the above.
Right. So let's move on to an MVR report, a motor vehicle record. How is that different from the PSP, or what's on an MVR report?
So your MVR will reflect your whole driving record. That's even just as an operating
Oh, so
license.
your personal record as well.
Yeah.
not
So
just
it will
CDL.
show me like your patterns even as just a regular driver before you got your CDL. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, I shouldn't have that on there because I got that before my CDL. Well, it's just showing that you have unsafe acts too as
Yep.
well. And so it will pull everything back. And typically you're looking and you pull it in and that's the second report that I pull, is just to see what's going on with them too as well. So typically a good one is like 4 pages long because you have all the details of, the change of, them moving it from a permit CDL holder to a Class A CDL holder. So you'll see the different changes in there. So it gets a little lengthy, or if they have other endorsements like tanker, or they got a motorcycle license, or hazmat is on there. So you try not to get too scary in the pages or too concerned in the pages right away. Until you get past that 4th page, and then it turns into 10 pages long.
Well, and if I remember right, my years of looking over that kind of stuff too, don't the different states do different things?
Yes.
So I know there's certain states out there that they record everything on your MVR. And it probably adds to the number of
Yes.
pages in certain states. And
It
I think
does.
others keep it fairly clean.
Yeah. I mean, some of the eastern and western states are pretty lengthy because they do track everything. They want to make sure that you know every move that this person did, or what they were applying for, or asking for this endorsement.
Is that an issue with drivers, especially maybe newer drivers into the industry, where they don't understand that even your driving record when you're operating a car or a four-wheeler is important, and it matters to you as a recruiter, because you're not only concerned about what they do in a big truck, you want to know what they're doing outside the job too, or what they've done in the past. And you've probably even seen some patterns maybe of speeding or reckless driving. So that stuff could have happened a long time ago in the past and maybe still disqualify them.
Yeah, it will, especially if they come in at an entry level, like a student level.
Yes.
I look at that a little bit more intense than most, because I want to make sure that you're doing those safe acts when you're not behind the wheel of one of our trucks too as well. So
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because when you come in at the student level, you really have to have a clean record.
Yes.
You need to keep your nose clean. So that may be something too, is if you're thinking about going to truck driving school or something like that, and maybe your teenage years, your driving record was kind of a hot mess, I think you might struggle actually getting a job because of that.
And you will. And I think even at that level, it's good for them to go and pull their motor vehicle record before they even go to college or go to get their CDL, because they're not going to say, hey, that this company is not going to hire you because of X, Y, Z. you should know exactly what's on there when you're applying for these companies, because when you get your CDL, it's going to change your whole world. And I think new CDL holders don't realize that.
Yeah, it's your livelihood. It's how you make your living and stuff. So, so that brings up a great point or great transition for us is talking about, first of all, as a driver, how do I know what's on my report? And then if there's something on there that I don't like or I don't agree with, what can I do about it?
So getting your report, you can actually go to your DMV or your BMV, depending on what state, that's how they call them, and request it yourself. You can go to their website, put in all your information. It's probably going to cost you anywhere from $1 to $10 to get it.
Okay.
And then they'll email it over to you. You can actually take that information with you to college or to whoever you're going to get your CDL through, and they can help explain that. Like, this is going to probably give you an issue. Or, hey, you know what? Everything looks great. Typically, a company can't hold it against you for 3 years, So anything past that 3-year mark, is not held against you. It's what you've done prior to that. So that's another way that you could, get the information that you need, or reach out to a company that you're researching. Like, hey, I really want to be part of their team once I get my CDL. What are your guys' requirements? I pulled my own MVR. What do you think?
Yeah.
And that recruiter could tell you, like, hey, yes, you would be a candidate for one of our student programs. Or they can say, with our guidelines, you're not going to be able to come on right away. You're going to have to wait till March of the next year.
So I think we've run into this before with students in when we bring students into our organization. So one of the things we like to do is we have a couple area schools that we recruit students out of, and we invite them to our place. So we give them a tour of our facility. We talk to them about how to tie down flatbed loads. We always, buy lunch for them and stuff. And we want them to see that and have that experience for us. But it's always interesting when the students first come in, we kind of sit them in the lobby, ask them some questions. Hey, why do you want to get into trucking? And, kind of go around the room. And it always comes out, there's some students in there a lot of times that don't have the best driving history, whether they've had DUI type things or reckless or speeding or something like that. It usually gets flushed out in those conversations. And it makes me wonder, the schools themselves, they don't necessarily care what your driving record is to get into the school. So they're not going to be the ones to stop you or tell you maybe this isn't the right time. They're basically getting your CDL for you, and they could do that even with a bad driving record.
Correct.
So,
but they should do a good job. It is part of their job to educate them too as well. They might not be a good fit for us, but they might be a fit for somebody down the road.
Yeah.
We're pretty tight on what we bring in at the entry level, because you're showing them, where their career could go.
If we were being honest about the industry and stuff, and if you find a carrier that's very difficult to get into, it's probably because they don't have a lot of need to bring in drivers, meaning they retain drivers well, so they're really being picky and choosy, and only, they want the best.
Yes.
They're not just going to take their chance on anybody, off the street with a CDL. But then you also see the opposite of that. You see some carriers that really do the bare minimum screening. They may invite you in. So it doesn't mean if you've got some blemishes on your record, you can't be a truck driver. You certainly can, but you may have to start at a kind of a different level company. And, as you clean up your record over that 3-year period and stuff, then maybe that's when you can apply to some of the better companies in the industries.
Yeah. The idea is to get in and start to get your bearings with this,
Right.
With this industry too. So not everybody is tight on those qualifications like we are.
Yeah. And I always think, where we're at in the middle of America, a lot of these, maybe you go to work for a farmer or, a small operator. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're not as picky on the background checks.
Correct.
Of the driver. It doesn't mean they don't have to do them. It just means maybe they're not as tight with their qualifications, I guess.
Or just like, I don't have the best equipment, so it doesn't matter, what I get behind the seat. But the idea is to always make sure that you're getting the best driver or educating the best driver out there on the road.
Right. So we know about the MVR report. How do I get a PSP? Is that something I have access to as a driver, as a CDL holder, or is that only something you have access to as a trucking company?
No, I mean, you can actually go and request it from the FMCSA. Everybody
Okay.
has the opportunity to go and grab it themselves.
Like to their website?
You
would
just go to their website, yep.
Okay.
And that's the same website that you would go to, like, as a new hire or a new driver. You're going to set up your clearinghouse anyway. So why don't you request it right then?
So you already have to set up an account
Correct.
to set up your clearinghouse, and in that same account, you would have access or could get access to a
Yes.
PSP report. Awesome. What if I get my PSP report back and there's something on there I don't agree with? Well, I mean, what avenues do I have to correct that? Who do I contact? Is it instant? Does it take time?
So you can actually go back to the FMCSA and say, hey, I have a discrepancy. They'll have you fill out a survey. And then at the end of that survey, then they'll review that information and then they'll send you out a discrepancy form. And then you can fill out that form and submit it. Now, if it doesn't belong there, or, hey, at that time I didn't have a CDL and it's saying I do, they can go back and help fight that and have it removed off your record. I've helped plenty of guys do that. In one case, I had a gentleman that went in, got a clean level 1 inspection, but the gentleman behind him came in and he had a bunch of dings on his. And it's just a data entry error. It was one number off, and it got dinged to the gentleman in
So
front.
the officer doing the inspection made a mistake when he was
Correct.
punching it in. It ended up costing this guy. The other guy probably loved it.
Yeah, 'cause it didn't go on his at all.
Probably clean. Yeah.
And he was like, great, I didn't get dinged for that. But
So mistakes do happen.
yes, we all are human.
If I'm a driver applying to a carrier, and the goal here is for the driver to already know what's on there. What happens if I'm a driver and I'm well aware what's on my MVR and my PSP report and I apply to you? Does that help me in any way because I'm already aware of the things that are there versus the guy that, kind of plays dumb and doesn't know or pretends he doesn't know and none of that's his fault and stuff? Would you rather work with somebody that has some character and accountability for their actions? Is that somebody you would take a harder look at, even if they have blemishes on their record?
Yes, because they already know. They're already confessing to, what happened. They are already telling you, how do I put that on my application? Will you still consider looking at me? Absolutely, because you're owning it. Now it's the guys that you get in, nope, I have nothing on my record. I've been driving for 10 years. I've never been pulled in for an inspection. I don't have anything on my MVR. Like, when can you get me into orientation? I'm like, well, let me take a look at these things. Give me a couple minutes. These reports come back fairly quickly. I'll get back to you. And then you get them and you're like, whoa, why didn't you tell me?
That's the 8 or 9 pager.
Why didn't you tell me this was on there? And then you call them back and you're like, hey, oh yeah, so I can go to orientation on Monday. Well, let's talk about a few things that I found. Well, you shouldn't have found anything. And I'm like, well, let me share these reports with you. So then I will pull those reports out of the system and email them because I want them to see what I'm seeing, because you always get that. Well, that's not mine. Well, it is yours.
It's yours until you prove it differently, unfortunately.
Correct.
So.
And so I want to share it with them. So I share it immediately. Let me know when you get it, in the email. Let's walk through it together so you can see that I'm seeing what you're seeing. And we can question it together. We can kind of come up with a solution. And sometimes you get like, okay, great, thanks for helping me. Or like, no, this is not me, click.
So you're actually trying to help people that you're probably not going to hire.
Correct.
Anyway. And then you get some that are grateful that you took the time to help them, or at least educate them and explain to them what's on there, why it's a problem, and what they need to do for steps to take it off. And then you get the ungrateful ones that basically go tell you to pack sand, I guess. But
I think it's just like because they're shell shocked, like they didn't realize it was that bad too.
Do you think they're really shell shocked, or they
50,
think
50.
they can? Yeah, that'd be my guess too.
It's tough because you don't know these guys, because they're not your personal friends.
First time you've ever talked to them,
absolutely.
so you don't know their character and personality. But so that's just another example, I think, of the carriers that are out there doing it right and going through the process and do the background checks, they're going to catch those things. Whether all carriers would take the time to try to educate them, I'm going to say most don't, especially when you think about the bigger carriers out there, because it's got to just be a process in recruiting drivers and just trying to get them through the system. But that's probably the advantage to go into some of the smaller size carriers like us, where, you know, it's a personal experience.
Yeah. And I mean, not that the bigger carriers aren't going to be great carriers for you too. They might be a great fit for you and you just fit right into the mold. But, you know, the idea behind my job is to make sure that I'm giving you as much information or education, so then you can take those tools and use it somewhere else.
So last question, what, from memory, like, what is the worst experience you had with the driver? You had to deliver bad news. What kind of reaction did they have?
Well, one has always stuck out with me. He actually was a friend, or was a referral from a friend, and nicest guy. Met him in the office. Had been in the industry for quite some time, but you could tell that he might have been in it for the wrong reasons in the industry, but that's all he knew. And he didn't have the means to fix what he needed to fix. He just kept going. And so when you're looking at it, that was actually 14 pages just to his PSP report. And I want to say 8 pages on his MVR, because it just was a mess.
So were these like personal violations of things he had control over, or was he working for a bad company that had like bad equipment and he just kept racking up the violations?
He was the bad company and
He
he
was both?
He was both.
So he had his own truck.
Yes, so he had his own truck, and I was just like, man, you got to really get a handle on some of this, because you might not have a license next year.
Well, and think about the safety, you know, the safety hazard running up and down the road if he wasn't taking care of equipment.
Yeah, and he was just looking for the dollar sign, you know.
Tried to help him, couldn't hire him, so he's probably on down the road to the next carrier that ready to sign him on with the bad truck and all the violations. The hard part of that too is that when that happens, just so drivers understand, is the carrier takes on the risk and responsibility too. So when a carrier turns you down, and you have a history of violations and you don't do your pre-trips and all those things that pop up, that carrier has to absorb some of that on their record now because they hired you.
Correct.
So, and they're not willing to do that in a lot of cases.
Well, in some cases, you know, like, yeah, it could be. I mean, I've had instances where I'm talking to drivers and their supervisor is telling them, well, just run it like that. And you're like, I have to do it, because if I don't do it, I'm going to be fired. Or they're telling me to go around this way station at this point because they know I'm not going to pass. That's where you got to really consider, like, what is best for you? Like saying, I can't take this load and I need to protect my license, or I take this load and I'm taking it at a risk.
That's the point where you wave the safety flag.
Correct.
As an individual and a professional driver, and said, no, I'm not going to do this because it's a safety issue or hazard. And if they tell you you need to do it or else, then you take the or else. You're like, good, I'm out of here. I'm not going to continue to work for a carrier that just looks the other way when it comes to safety. So, and
even as a customer that's using you as a carrier, you're not going to be able to get it down the road if you're not fixing that stuff anyway. So you're not a reliable carrier anyways.
Right. Well, I think that wraps us up. So we covered PSP, what it is, why it's important, what kind of information's on there, and the MVRs. And then we talked a little bit about if you find something on your MVR, go to your DMV. And if you find something on your PSP, jump over to the FMCSA website and set up an account. And there's a process to correct some of those. Now, it's not fast.
No.
But it is, and it's something you should do as a professional driver. You should want to keep that record as accurate and as clean as possible along.
Well, it's your golden ticket. You should be knowing what your golden ticket has on it, because it's going to advance you to the next level.
That's right. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, absolutely.
Appreciate you. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. If you're ready to work for a carrier that puts honesty back in recruiting, check us out at chiefcarriers.com.